great to be here today. Hi, my name is Peter Urpeth. I'm a writer and director of Emergence Digital. We put together programs of writing, of support for writers and publishers, which started out in the Highlands and Islands, but now we tend to work across all of Scotland and in fact worldwide. And I think we've actually got quite a few people today who are joining us from outside of Scotland, even outside of the UK. So great to see you, and you're very welcome. Before getting into it, just to say a huge thank you as always to our funders, who are Highlands and Islands Enterprise, the business development agency for the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. We've been working together now for must be 20 years, and it's been a very beneficial and fruitful partnership, and we hope it will continue. Absolutely delighted to have with me today Elle Nash and Lindsay Johnstone. Before coming to them, I just want to say please leave your mic and video off, other than Lindsay and Elle, of course, and please ask any questions in the chat button, which is on the bottom rail of the screen. You'll see, and we'll come to them in due course. The video is being recorded, and I'll send a link to that to all of today's participants. Just, oh yeah, somebody's just come in live from Chicago. So hi, yeah, we've got some. We're crossing the Atlantic. So starting off today, what I'd like to do is first of all ask Elle and Lindsay just to briefly introduce themselves before we get into the real meat of the subject of new kind of social media. So, Elle.
Hi, I'm excited to be here today. My elevator pitch of me. I'm the author of 4 novels, most recently Deliver Me, which was longlisted for Scotland's National Book Award. And I'm also an editor for the Creative Independent. I ran a literary magazine called Witchcraft Magazine for almost 10 years, 9 years. I recently shuttered it because I have other projects and stuff that are ongoing. I run a writing workshop called Fuck, Marry, Kill, and also a book club on my Substack, which is at femalerage.substack.com. And my whole journey has really been about cultivating community, like literary community, and just trying to learn and write and read fiction that I love.
Great, thanks, Elle. And Lindsay, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys as well, and thanks so much for this chance. It's brilliant to be here. Really looking forward to the chat. Yeah, so I'm Lindsay Johnstone, and I am a writer based in Glasgow. So I am currently unpublished. Maybe that's something that will resonate with some of the people who are here today. I'm on that journey, but I have found a home, a digital home on Substack, where I'm a bestseller. I'm in the top 40 publications globally in the parenting category. And I write there primarily, but my words are also in Glasgow Review of Books. So I review memoir because I'm primarily a life writer, and review poetry as well. And I run expressive writing workshops and courses through my Substack. So similar to what Elle was sort of suggesting there, you know, it's a place rather than just a publication or a newsletter where lots of different things can happen. And also have bits and pieces and other publications here and there. But my background and sort of coming into writing, I suppose I worked as an English teacher for a long time, and sort of pivoted away from that. But while I was an English teacher, I wrote for the Herald and I wrote for the BBC. I used to create the bite-sized content for what was then standard grade English, higher English, and sort of came into sort of life writing and expressive writing sort of from a sort of more copy-based background. So that is me. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So where I'd like to start today is really just to sort of point out that in the kind of discussions we had about this, myself, Elle and Lindsay, before starting, and in thinking about this kind of session, this really kind of came about because, well, we thought about it about 10 12 years ago, I used to do quite a lot of this kind of thing when a lot of social media was quite new, and the idea of being a writer in that space was a growing thing, and there were all sorts of new opportunities. There was but so much, of course, has changed in that period of time, and perhaps the biggest change for me personally occurred this year when, for the last decade, I've run a thing called the Writer's Pitch in Scotland, which I sort of dreamt up this idea of writers' pitches on Twitter, basically 11 years ago. And then we did the first one 10 years ago, which seemed then like a really smart idea, that you'd use the hashtag and you'd make your pitch and publishers and agents could follow the hashtag. And there's a very simple engine, and it worked very well, and everyone seemed very happy with that. And at various times across the years, we've, on the day of the pitch, we've trended at #1 on Twitter. We were doing it on the day David Bowie died, I think, and we were swapping places with that news. And, that kind of dynamic was there. And it's particularly in the early days of Twitter, it felt like a very economical and kind of savvy way to hold an event like that. This year, we held that event on Blue Sky after much trawling around other sorts of potential hosts, including Discord and so on, and just found that Blue Sky was the place that most closely replicated some of the early experiences of Twitter. So my own work, in a way, has gone through a huge transformation. Allied to that is the sense that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Nothing really emerged as being right for every writer across that period of time. And I think that's very much the spirit in which we'd like to go into today as well, to say there isn't really a how-to book on this. There are things you have to do to make the most if you've decided on a particular platform, but who you are, how you are, what you achieve, what you want to achieve, all the rest of it is up for grabs, and they're really the biggest part of this. So I'd like to start by coming to, Lindsay first, I suppose, just to ask both of you in turn to run us through your kind of personal journey with social media, how you started out thinking of yourself as a writer and having, to some extent, your part of your business on there, how you approach the world on there, who you are on there, and where, from that point, as to how that's evolved as to where you are now. Because I think these stories contain they're a rich seam of information about the positives and negatives of the whole thing. So start with you, Lindsay.
So I'd written a book, as people tend to do. I'd written a book very much behind the scenes, a memoir, a sort of intergenerational family story, and had started to submit extract of that to competitions and had some success. I was shortlisted for the Scottish Mental Health Arts Prize in 2022, and then I won the John Byrne Award in 23. And in and around that, had gotten myself my first agent, but wasn't using social media at that point really at all to promote what I was doing. It was like sort of, me and my little, bubble of creation. And then when something kind of had a bit of success, then I would say, this happened. But I went to an event actually with the person who is now my agent, so Caro Clarke at Portobello Literary, was on a panel at Paisley Book Festival at the sort of beginning of 2023. So we're really not talking about, the distant past at all. I had a manuscript on submission at the time with who was then my agent, and I had just kind of done this and sat back and sort of was thinking, oh, news will come, good news will come, a book deal will arrive, and it didn't. But I went to this event and Caro was talking, and it was very clear to me that I had sort of misunderstood the purpose of an agent. So my agent was responsible for trying to get a deal for that manuscript, but I was responsible for my career as a writer, which felt like a bit of a newsflash. Now, I'd set up a Substack and not done anything with it. It was just sitting there in the background. I thought maybe it would be something that, again, could maybe be a place to direct editors to, you know, she's also writing here. And I had a few little things bubbling away, but nothing, again, I wasn't talking about it in public. But after that event, I really felt that I'd had a bit of a wake-up call and understood what my job was. If I want to have a career as a writer and be able to sustain that, not just in terms of books, but in other ways, then I really had to start to demonstrate that I was living the life of a writer. How do you do that? Well, you write and you find a place, you find an online home for that if you are unpublished, and possibly you're looking for other opportunities in publication elsewhere. But I went for it with Substack and just thought this is the place, and started slowly, so publishing every fortnight initially, but then weekly, to send out a sort of weekly Sunday essay on the topics that sort of sit within what I write about. So parenting of girls, midlife, being someone who's going through an early perimenopause, mental health, mothering, all of that sort of stuff, caring, and found my groove, and then started to use my Instagram, which had been a private account forever, but changed it and decided to use that as the place where I could start to share, look, this is happening somewhere else, like I'm doing this thing. And became quite brass-necked about initially trying to build a mailing list. You know, with Substack, you own the email addresses, you own them. You've been given them, and you can then, stay in Substack, or you can maybe migrate to a different platform, which I'm sure we'll maybe talk about later, the benefits of certain ways of communicating with your audience or your readership or building community. But I started to build that list, but not only did I start to develop a sense of community of readers who you can interact with in the comments at the end of each piece, and maybe have a bit of that cross-pollination as my Instagram account changed. And I started to use that as a place to share, not just what I was doing elsewhere, but use that platform for its own benefit, because I think Elle will probably want to talk a bit more about Instagram, because I know that her account's massive. But that sort of almost like symbiotic relationship, different rooms, different kind of experiences, but a lot of crossover as well between who I'd sort of be hanging about with in both places, but communities of readers, but also communities of writers. Elle, you touched on this, that sense that you're looking to find your people, and it could be that in terms of what you write about or what you're interested in, that evolves, but it might also be who are your peers, or whose writing do you love, and do you want to demonstrate a sort of you're one of their fans, but you're doing some stuff too, trying to build those kinds of connections. And I used both platforms actually to find and to nurture relationships with other writers. So there's sort of two sides to it. It's never just about broadcasting. It's very much about finding people whose work you resonate with. And also it might be geographical too. So obviously, I feel very connected and becoming more and more connected with the Scottish scene. And that then broadens because I've got an international readership now that I didn't have 2 years ago, and have readers in 71 countries and 45 US states. And, there's a sense of it not just being maybe that parochial sort of, I love having a scene in Glasgow and I love having a scene in Scotland, but that there's a different outlook possible as well. So I suppose that takes you to sort of where I am now as somebody who's got both a professional network and a community that I engage with in lots and lots of different ways, maybe we'll talk about. And it's growing steadily and in a kind of sustainable way, because you've got to be careful. How many people can you hold? How many of them can you actually, be of service to, as well as when you're building these communities? But it's not a dry thing, and it doesn't feel to me like a sort of cold and calculated way to be online. It feels authentic to me. It feels like I'm carving out spaces that I can be myself in, or a version that is my working self. As you say, we're building businesses. We're not just using these platforms as sort of shop windows, you know, for here's what you could get, you know, here's what you can have, because we're working.
That's really interesting. Yeah, can I just ask you then before coming to Elle, could you outline for us kind of what a social media week would look like for you at the moment? I know you put
Yeah.
quite a few things out. How's that kind of planned? What does it look like your week at the moment?
Okay, so I'd love to tell you that I'm really sort of strategy driven. I'm so not. What does it look like? So on a Sunday, let's do the old-fashioned way, and a week begins on Sunday. So on Sunday at 6 o'clock in the morning, every Sunday, people who subscribe to my Substack get a delivery in their inbox, either their email inbox and or their Substack inbox if they use that sort of app or use the desktop. So I then spend a portion of Sunday sort of in communication with the people who've read what I've posted, or the interview that I've posted, the video, whatever sort of content it is. And also, I use Instagram to sort of push that. And I'm starting to think about other potential platforms like Blue Sky as well to consider, where I share what's happening elsewhere. And then I use Instagram stories every day. So really, you know, I'll appear. I always say good morning. I like to be out on my morning stomp, having my coffee, whatever I'm doing, you know, morning. And then quite often I'll ask a question. I'll ask people something about, you know, whatever it is I'm talking about. And this week I feel like I'm speaking a lot about the impact of AI and the scraping that Meta has done on people's published works, because Society of Authors had a protest about that yesterday in London. I'm talking about that. I'm talking a lot about the benefits cuts that are happening and proposed to happen here in the UK for PIP, because my piece on Sunday relates to that. I'm in conversation as part of a series that I run called The Cost of Caring, with writer and editor Louise Kenward. So she's posted something today. So a lot of it is sort of generated by what's happening that has a relationship to the work that I do. And caring is one of the things that I have experience of as a young carer, and as still now sandwich generation with 2 kids and a mother who needs care. You know, I'm still in it. So I feel that, you know, it's difficult to tell you. You know, I don't know what I'm posting about next week. I know that it feels that it comes out of what's going on. And also I'll do a lot of sharing of other people's work, you know, resharing of things that I've seen that resonate, but also I can hear my cat through there. There's always cat content. You feel like you sort of pepper a little cat, you know, every now and again, and you catch people. Are you here for the cat, or are you here for the politics or the mothering or the caring, or what is it you want? And I don't think about it, don't take it too seriously, I would say. So most days you'll find me sort of there. On Substack, I'm also kicking about in the sort of social feed there, which is called Notes. And again, it's amplifying other people that have written things that resonate with me and the things that interest me, as well as, you know, popping in the odd bit of frippery. Last night, tried to get a bin collected from outside my home, to no avail. People loved that. That was great. And you think, well, the most successful content I've had recently is around a black bin on my front lawn and the frogs in the pond. You can't guess these things. So there we go. That's a week. That's what it looks like. Every day I'm kind of kicking about in these spaces, hoping to chat to people who are in my orbit. That's what it looks like.
Right, thanks, Lindsay. So, Elle, just to come to you then, and basically sort of ask the same thing about, you know, how this all started for you, and where you started and where you've got to now.
Yeah. Well, In high school, I wrote poetry on LiveJournal and on Diaryland a lot, which is, I don't even know if Diaryland is still around now. So I feel like I've been writing online and like publishing my work online for a really long time, but I wouldn't call it necessarily like publishing. And then when I got to university, I started my Twitter in 2007 for my journalism class because it was like brand new at the time. And like all my journalism teachers were like, we have to figure out what social media is going to do to the news environment. And at that time, it was still kind of being used as like a news aggregator and really heavily for journalists to like share work and like find sources and like all of that kind of stuff. And then through that, I kind of just like left it alone for a while. Um, in 2012 was when I started coming back to fiction with the goal to get published. After journalism, like after I did my journalism degree, I started working more in like public relations and marketing. Not necessarily by choice, but it was like just what I kind of fell into. And while that was miserable, that's kind of what motivated me to be like, okay, I want to go back to fiction and explore this more. Um, and what I did was I attended my first like in-person writing workshop in 2013, and I'd read that this was the workshop I'd read Chuck Palahniuk had cut his teeth in. But they were in Portland, Oregon. So when I left after that workshop, you know, they were all across the country. So I kept in touch with them online using like Facebook, and email and that kind of thing. Um, and from there, I was like, okay, how do I find like I was like, you can just publish your work in literary magazines. Like, how does this work? How do you find literary magazines or places to get published? It wasn't even a thought I'd had. How do you even find like agents, you know, where are these people? And I was on Tumblr, I think like 2014, where I was like obsessively searching for people who had attended the MFA schools that I had applied to because I was like, maybe this will give me some hint about my application being accepted or something like that, which didn't happen. But I found some people who were like publishing in indie, like independent literary magazines, like these really small magazines. And from there, it just kind of like exploded for me. I was reaching out to other writers and finding, you know, this chain, like different magazines, finding fiction and writing that I loved. And so from there, it was like, that was how I started building community. I would go on Twitter and see if the literary magazine like had a Twitter account. I would read what they posted. I would interact with the writers whose work like I just really loved. I would tell them that I loved their work. So that was really like how it all started. And then I was like, I want to do this too. So in 2015, when I started my literary magazine, I was using Facebook to organize events and I would invite people. I would find like friends of friends that I knew who seemed to be writers and just like add people and, you know, just interact with them and explore that world. Um, my Twitter over time grew. And for a while as I was publishing, like when I, you know, I had some short stories that started to get published, I was thinking more about how I was like, I guess like positioning myself online. And I would like, to be honest, I think that's when I was like more conscientious of like a persona I was building. Cause now I was like, oh, these are people who are watching me and reading my fiction. And Twitter was a great place for a time to practice, I would say, like posting, you know, like the 140 character at the time, like quips, which were for me were always like things about being like a sad girl. That was kind of like the persona that I was like inhabiting, and my fiction really lived in that world. Um, and then yeah, I was just connecting with writers and Facebook. The Facebook like lit community was actually the reason why my first book got published. I was friends with, well, friends, you know, like Facebook friends with someone who was an editor at a very, very small independent press. And he reached out and asked what I was working on. And I told him about my manuscript. And he was actually working for a different press and he passed it up to the editor. And that was how my book got accepted, which is so, to me, I'm like, this is so incredibly like rare, which I understand. Like I didn't have an agent. And this editor at Design liked my book. It wasn't even finished yet at the time. Like it was mostly there. So I was really, really lucky in that respect. Um, and that's when for me, Instagram was kind of what started changing, you know. Facebook started kind of falling out of fashion. It, you know, it kind of gets like really messy when you end up being one of those people who has like the max amount of friends was like 5,000 friends or something. you know, Facebook becomes unusable. So it's like hard for me to build community in that same way and keep up with the literary world, you know. Um, but so my first book then came out, and through that was how I got my agent, 'cause through Publishers Weekly Review, I had a couple of agents reach out. But my literary magazine was still growing, and as more noise started creeping up on like Twitter and Facebook and that kind of thing, that's when I started thinking more about like my background in marketing, about how I could not only promote my work like coming out, but also the contributors' work for my magazine. Because I was like, well, I'm making this magazine. I want people to see it. I want people to buy like the print issues. So when is like the best time to like post my work for people to see it? How do you kind of outcompete the noise in that way? So I was researching about, you know, like, right, like Instagram strategy, and like you were saying, like consistency, timing, when and how not to tag, like those kinds of things. Um, and all of this was still really driven by community, you know. I wanted community, like the workshop that I had attended in 2013 that was run by Tom Spanbauer. And so that was really just like what I tried to foster in in my online platforms. Um, then when my first book came out in the UK, that was actually when I really learned more about like the Bookstagram community, and then like book talk. I think TikTok was around then. It was like kind of new at the time. It was just taking off. And that was a place where I was like, oh, there's like a whole world of like also readers, you know, people reading and writing and like leaving reviews. And I started connecting with more people that way because I also liked to read and like post reviews. And so I would use hashtags and that kind of thing for books I posted. And it's very much like Lindsay, like you were saying, you share things, you know, often. I think that's how it was for me, was just like wanting to share stuff that I loved. And then I think as a natural result of that, people then feel like they want to share your work and like celebrate the stuff that you do in kind. Um, and then when I had a book come out called Gag Reflex, which was about like my live journal days in a way, like a fictionalized account of it. And I was like, I'm gonna launch like another online journal in tandem with this like concept, this experimental novella coming out. So that's when I actually started my Patreon. And I was like, I'll just give it a go, you know, like I'll just see what happens. Um, and I don't think I had like a very specific plan in mind. I think as someone who's worked in marketing for a long time, I really resent the word content. I hate that word so much. Like, I don't want to create content. I don't want to feel like a content creator. Like, I want to feel like I'm working on fiction, and I'm working on art, and I'm like helping cultivate that arena in my life. So I would post once a week, maybe. I would just post kind of whatever I wanted. I would post prose, um, photos. I would share my thoughts on like various literary things. And that was great. I got to, you know, foster community and stuff like that for a couple of years. Um, Twitter had begun to change. A lot of it is becoming more commercialized. The internet was becoming more like meme heavy, I would say. Also more um like Twitter was starting to become the cesspit that it is today in a way, right? Um, so I think that's when I started moving more like towards Instagram again. By I'm like, how did it really change? I think that was when I was more strategic. I would post like a selfie and then like like a photo of a book, and then a selfie and then like a photo of a book. I was like really interested in like grid curation and like all this kind of stuff. And it seemed to work. Like I noticed people responded when I posted photos of my face, and I feel like we could debate for several hours about whether or not that's about like how social media could lead to self-objectification, or if people just like connecting with a human face. There's a lot to like be said about how that works. But I don't know, there was something about it that just like helped encourage me to continue running my work. Um, and then I wanted to start a book club, which I started Goth Book Club. And that's when I was like, oh, now I'm kind of locked in to we were talking about content. Like I was like locked into a schedule and a specific kind of thing that I want to do. And Patreon started to feel somewhat limiting to me because it's kind of siloed. There's not really a way to like grow community outside of just like continuously posting your links like on Twitter or on Instagram when you have a new post, which I started to kind of resent. Like I do not like the idea of having to hustle, right? To like make something continue to grow. Substack felt like it has more of like a discoverability, like a community-based platform rather than just like, here's my silo, give me some money, and then like I'll post some content for you. You know, Substack feels like there's space and room to have conversation and grow and share in a better way than Patreon does. So I moved to Substack, I think last year, and mine has been slow growing. I'm not as consistent as you, Lindsay, about posting. I am sometimes hard on myself about that. Like I think if I was more consistent, then maybe it would grow more. I sometimes also, as a fiction writer, Lindsay, I don't know if you experience this. As a fiction writer, I sometimes feel like I have this thing in my head where I'm like, well, hasn't been through an editor. How do I know it's good? Should I post this? So I get like hung up on that sometimes. But it's still there and it grows, and new people sort of subscribe every day. Um, and I find when I hop on Notes, which I really like, I don't know, it's nice to like have conversations there in a space that isn't inundated with like consistent advertising and like all of that kind of thing, you know? Um, and yeah, I think that's like, I'm like, is that the majority of my journey? I think where I've come now, I went through that period of being like this hustle culture thing where I was like, I'm going to promote and be really consistent and have strategy. And now I'm kind of like, I really just want to pick the things that I want to be on that are fun. Like, there's the pressure of like TikTok or even making reels and that kind of thing. And like, for me as an author, I'm like, I don't want to make reels with my face in it. I don't want to be on TikTok. I want my book to be on TikTok, but I don't want to be on TikTok. I really just want to like have a place that I can connect with people and continue to do that specifically, like on a consistent basis.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, partly because you covered so many different current and former platforms. I mean, there's been my feeling at the moment is that there's a kind of settled set of platforms that seem to be growing. Substack is, of course, I think the predominant one, having, as you've pointed out, I think hit on a kind of a raw nerve with many people who were committed to Patreon, maybe also with kind of YouTube content as well, that it provides particularly for writers a kind of a better mix of the marketing, personal, these kinds of content sit better in these places. But how was the move then into I asked this of both of you, how was this move then into kind of like a monetization process of this? I mean, because of course there was also something like Medium, and that then became a way in which people could monetize their content, but again without the kind of social connection to it. It was something we would market on other social media platforms, whereas Substack, I think, has this kind of inherent and quite strong social functioning that unites all of this very well. So how did this process of monetization of I mean, I presume now for both of you it's actually a kind of an embedded part of your of how you survive as writers. And I never squeamish about talking about this. For me, it's always been how can I sustain what I want to do? I don't go into this to become a multi-millionaire. It's just I found myself doing this some years ago. I want to keep doing it. So you have to survive somehow, and these opportunities arise. That's my kind of engagement with it, is necessity and enjoyment and those kinds of things. How did you move into the thing of monetizing then, and that making that move and finding your home in a platform?
For me, so it started with starting the Patreon because you have to have like a paywall, no matter what you do. And from what I had read, it was like you have different tiers of different things that you promise people. And my friend Emma actually gave me really good advice when I first started, which was like, don't overpromise, like maybe you feel like at the outset there's a lot that you can do, but it can become like overwhelming really quickly. And so I think I set like my first tier for like £2 or something like that. And then there was like a slightly higher one that was like 5 or something. Um, I'm trying to remember, like, I think some of it was like, I'll send you postcards or I'll send you like a signed book or something like that before I was thinking about my book club itself that I'd done. And that did get overwhelming. It was hard because sometimes I'm like really bad at mailing stuff, which I realized that's like not my strength. So I was like, okay, this doesn't work. So I have to figure out something else. And I wanted to do the book club. I think that idea just came to me. And then I was like, oh, this is something actually that I can do that like offers it on this like £5 tier, where once a month I can just like host this space for people to have read a book, and then we all just come together and talk about what we liked about it. And then I'll record it, like I'll record the chat as long as like everyone's comfortable, and then I could like keep it in an archive so we always have like this space. And because I also have because I have writer friends and people who love to talk about their work, if I chose like their book for book club, I could have them come in and talk to you know, these other people and ask them questions, like kind of a live interview, and Q&A about their work. And that was kind of like that move into monetization for me. Moving to Substack, it feels like a little more complicated in a way because in my mind, I'm always like, I think even as the marketer, I'm thinking like, well, why would someone, what's the value, you know, what's the value? Like, why would someone want to subscribe to this? And I dug into like a lot of research about Substack and how to utilize it and ways of like growing your subscriber base and that sort of thing. And there's a lot of like tried and, you know, tried and true tested methods in there, especially with like their strategy down to like where you place the paywall and the subscribe button. Courtney Mom, who does like before and after the book deal, she is so good at this where she will like pack a post with super intriguing information, and then right below the paywall is all the like juicy stuff that you really want. And so then I'm always like, do I want to do it? And then I do. I've subscribed and unsubscribed from Courtney like 5 times because I'm always like, I can't do this every month. But like to her, you know, she's really, really good at that. And for me, like because I'm a different kind of writer, I'm like, I don't know if that's something that I can do for my own like Substack strategy. So I keep my Goth Book Club stuff like behind the paywall where that's something that people can access, and then they always have like this archive to visit. And then everything else that I write, that I want to write, I just keep it open, you know, for fun. I think it feels also like less pressure for me personally that way, because when if it's all behind this paywall and it became like a thing, then I would be like, well, people are giving me money for this and it has to be good, you know, and I just stress myself out about it. And I think just being like, well, I just want to write a thing because I find it interesting, and then it's just out there, that you know, it feels like less pressure to me. There's this other thing that I'm offering. I also do, you know, I run workshops, and I do like one-on-one manuscript editing and that sort of thing. And this can become like, you know, this place, Substack can become this place where people see that, they come across my writing. Maybe they end up finding my books, you know, it's like my little flag in the sand. Maybe they want to join book club. I've tried to, for me personally, I've tried to like let go a little bit of the pressure of like, make it grow, make it grow. You know, I've tried to just think like, you know, just people will make the decision that they want when they make it. And that's okay. Yeah. Cause yeah, it's stressful when you're constantly thinking in like that hustle mode of like, I have to make this grow, or, you know, you know, my career is going to fail and nothing good is ever going to happen to me, or that kind of thing. I'm trying to trust more of being like, no, just do what you want. And I think when you do what you want and you enjoy it, people see that, and that in and of itself, you know, like that makes, you know, your work, that's the reason why people will want to like subscribe or give you money, you know, when they're like, here's my $5.
What about you, Lindsay? Were you to be found in Patreon or Medium or in any of these other platforms prior to Substack?
No. And I think that there's probably a good reason for that. That Substack, I've just answered a question in the chat actually, which was really interesting, about why it was that I chose that platform. It felt to me like the one that made sense as a writer. And I know that it's changing now because, you know, and we might have opinions about the fact that Substack is no longer just a place to engage in deep thought on long form writing, which is what it was sort of 3 years ago when I'd started to find out about it. you know, now it is like you have a channel, and I do think of it as a channel because I do video content, I do live chats, I you know, I use all the features that are available to me because it's fun to do that, and I love the flexibility of it. But it's not what it was. It did feel like the best fit, and I think what Elle said about the discoverability and the sense of intentionality as well about the people who have perhaps appeared in that platform with the same spirit, and you know, that felt to me like the best place to be. And when it came to monetizing, it's really tricky because as an unpublished writer, I'm now working on my second book, and you know, it's all like this because we know what the industry is like at the moment. But as an unpublished writer, coming in and sort of saying, well, pay me for my words is feels quite bold. And you know, that sense of, well, why? So for me, 2 years ago, I decided that I would bring in my facilitation. So I'd done a lot of in-person facilitation of different types of groups. I used to run a women's group in Glasgow, and obviously I've got a teaching background. So I was like, well, yeah, I run creative writing things, and I've done this and I've done that. I've just never done it online. But I thought I could use this platform and make the monetization side of it, the subscription model side of it, about access to my courses. And so that felt to me like it made sense. And I've sort of run with that model where, you know, 6 times a year I run one-off sessions that I call my seasonal session. And actually, really, anyone can drop in. I have a membership set at £7 a month or £50 annually. But if anybody wants to come along, I'm always like, the door is open. Come and try it out. See what you think. It's an hour. And then I run other courses, either expressive journaling courses or memoir courses, which actually have a sense of sort of progression and outcome and a bit of accountability built in, with one-to-one time and group time and bringing in a guest reader. You know, it feels like a really lovely way to sort of, you know, there's that sense of a tiered set of offerings. And those would be for my more committed members, you know, and I've got, again, a tiered payment plan. So you could be £7 a month, £50 a year, or you could pay to come to one of my sort of bigger courses. And that's at the moment £175, but you get a year's access to my whole Substack for that. And as Elle said, you know, most of my writing now, I just put it out there on a Sunday. What I've done is I've locked the comments down to members. So my membership is you know, growing, but it's sustainable, and it feels like I can manage the comments when I'm only inviting people who are part of that community to share quite vulnerably sometimes, you know, but it gives it that sense of sort of, there's a bit of gatekeeping around it. It's not just, you know, the internet. It's not all of Substack. It's a sense of that little gang getting together every week. So that's how I sort of came to feel okay about the subscription model. And, you know, it's that thing again of sort of levels of, you know, I don't want to talk about it in terms of access to me, but access to the community that exists there. How much access do you want? Are you just someone who wants to read and then close the laptop? You know, and actually sometimes we all feel like that. Or do you want to be part of the conversation? Or do you want to feel like, you know, you're going to meet your own goals in terms of your writing? You know, always thinking, well, what's, as you said, Elle, what's the benefit for that individual? And being really mindful of not going heavy on the sell all the time. As these platforms get busier and busier, what is your USP? You know, why do people come to me over someone else? Why would they trust me? Maybe because actually a lot of the time I'm not talking about what I sell. And I'm just, you know, sharing and being there and actually, yeah, sort of reliably kicking about the place. You know, it's very clear what you can get, and there are lots and lots of ways that you can access what's available, but equally, there's absolutely no pressure. I'm happy to be there because I really enjoy it as a space. And yes, it's where I make part of my income. but I'm also part of lots of other people's communities as a sort of member, you know, where you can sit back, and it's so lovely to be able to sort of sometimes just, yeah, flip it and be part of someone else's space with other people and other ideas floating around. And Substack feels like, for me, it's where the people I want to hang out with are. And so those two sides, those kind of two requirements for me personally as a business owner, trying to use it as a platform for my writing and courses, but also as a consumer. And I would say the same for Instagram, to be honest, you know, that I enjoy being in that space. And we could talk, I'm sure, at length about how we feel about Meta right now. And we don't have to talk about that, because in some ways, I feel like I'm just picking and choosing the bits that, for me, feel joyful, knowing that, you know, if eventually I do have a print publication to talk about, then I want to have nurtured those spaces in advance. So maybe that's worthwhile just kind of dwelling on for a wee minute from my point of view, is that I'm building community and building readership and building connections in a way that I hope will have a bit of a legacy. You know, that if I get to that particular point, then I can say, well, here we go, like, we're all here, and they are here because I've been building that sort of community for a while already. So that feels to me quite important.
I think that's a really, really interesting area. I suppose, and I was, it kind of struck me at the beginning when you said I'm not published and all the rest of it, and then, you know, you have so much to actually kind of like define and say about the amount that you are in fact published. It's a pretty constant process really, and I think there's quite a bit of a challenge in that as well, in terms of you know, how this stuff kind of defines what a writer is as well. I mean, if a writer is any one thing, I mean, you know, I'm traditionally published, I'm self-published, and I've done a lot of work with people on YouTube, for instance, who've got big followings, who then you wonder, well, why would they go to a publisher and give away all these years of marketing they've done in, you know, and when they can go directly themselves and self-publish to their communities and so on. How do you come to Elle with this? How do you feel that this process, does it need to change what you do? Do you find that it has redefined you as a writer, that you're actually adapting and changing your original conception of what it was to be a writer around these new kind of opportunities? I mean, does it change the content of what you do, what you might do for a published book, you know?
Yeah, and when you say the process, you mean like the process of being on social media, right? Yeah. Has it changed? You know, it's hard to say because, like, being chronically online since I was like 13, I've always had community spaces where I'm sharing my writing. It's almost like, and it's informative. And my novella Gag Reflex is literally like this experimental novel that's in, like, it takes place over live journal entries, you know, from 2005, exploring this concept. So they've kind of like formed together in a way for me. Um, I've never really thought of it affecting affecting how I view myself as a writer, whether or not I'm defined as one. For me, I'm like, well, if you write, then you're a writer. That's kind of like just it's very, you know, that's always very simple for me. Um, I think sometimes the way that it changes how I think about my writing is when everyone else around me is having a lot of success, and then I'm, like, despairing about the things that, you know, I'm not doing right now. Like, that can be like, I've heard Instagram described, for example, as like a lifestyle magazine, right? Like, that's kind of what you're doing when you, like, go in and you scroll. It's like it's very curated. You never really see, like, the bad or messy stuff. Twitter was, like, where all the messy stuff, like, all the messy feelings and stuff went, but, like, Instagram was, like, you're stepping into, like, an IKEA, you know, like, showroom of someone's life of being a writer. Um, and so I do find that that happens for me at times where I'm like, you know, I'm terrible and I'm never gonna get published again, or you know what I mean? Like all of the thoughts and stuff that like kind of happen. Um, but I find that what happens then is I have to step away, right? Like I have to step away from it. And I think that actually helps in a way, because when I look at Instagram or like Twitter, for example, as this is my place where I just only go to like connect with my community and like talk about my writing or things that I love about writing or books or anything like that. When I just think about it as that, and I'm not thinking about it in terms of like the way I think we would normally use social media, which is like through doom scrolling, keeping up with news or like those kinds of things, it helps keep me at a distance and like more regulated, I think, in terms of the space it takes up in my brain. Because if it's taking up all the space in my brain, then that's actually taking away space for me to think about my work and my writing, and that sort of thing. Um, so I think in that way, I think that's one way that it has really influenced me, is like this has this only specific purpose. And if I just try to keep using it for that specific purpose, then I can stay away from like the despairing, and like bad feelings I have. So I can actually focus on what I love to do, which is like the work, like the writing and the reading and that sort of thing.
I think that it's really interesting. I mean, for me, it was the challenge was this thing that when I was young, which is a lot longer ago than for you guys, and I found myself writing, there was a thing about being an authentic writer that didn't look anything like this. I mean, it probably had the same feelings of being the authentic self and the writer, but it was all about getting that book and getting the agent, and it was all very aloof. And in my case as well, there was always the thing that you didn't come from the right class to be all these things and go to the right schools and all the rest of it. I just ask you, Lindsay, how that has changed has this changed your relationship to yourself as a writer, and is that change necessary to make a success of these kinds of opportunities?
Yeah, I think what you've said is going to resonate with a lot of people. And perhaps what we're finding, maybe some of us who've got in our minds still the sort of, as you say, the hoops you jump through or the apprenticeship that you serve to be a writer, in our minds, trying to be unshackled from that a wee bit. And you've said, you picked me up on saying I'm not published, because in my mind, I still feel like I want traditional print publication, but it's almost like a different track. So there's that journey of submitting to competitions and having things published in journals and building a profile, serving your apprenticeship, getting your agent, winning some prizes, getting a book deal, writing the book, or, going through that on one track, but at the same time saying, well, what else does this look like? And as a jobbing writer, well, what it looks like is, even if it's not involving a platform like Substack, you're quite often mentoring, or you're teaching, or you're editing, or you're somehow involved in your community, or maybe actually there's still a day job. Like, let's just be frank about it, that you've got that sense of the life of a writer existing separately, perhaps even to the print publication sort of thing that's maybe happening off to the side. And so that, I think, is a mindset shift that perhaps people coming through now maybe have a different perspective on. I don't know, but I'm sort of aware that you've got to be quite agile, I think, and see what is and isn't working, for you personally, and also be aware of the broader context. But at the same time, keep doing your work. Just keep going. So if you are, your goal is to have a poetry collection, for example, don't abandon your goal of the poetry collection and funnel all of your energy into cultivating a social media profile, because that this is what you want to do. So be really clear about what it is that actually your intentions are, your goals as a writer. I'm on a 2-year course with Arvin at the moment, which is England's National Writing Centre. So there are 15 of us working together across 3 disciplines, poetry, non-fiction and fiction. And the goal is it's like an MFA essentially, but it's quite an industry focused one. The goal is that everybody will get out of the other end in 2026 with, you know, a collection of poetry, a non-fiction manuscript, a novel or equivalent, whatever it is that they're working on, and be kind of publication ready. So in a sense, I've kind of come to that maybe having jumped through a few hoops in advance, but you know, it's all to the good. So there is that real sense of these things take time, and maybe someone put in the comments about what Elle does. You know, obviously Elle's a fiction writer. You know, can you create enough fiction, you know, every week to satisfy your audience? But you don't write like that on Substack, because it's more like you might just drop in with a, yeah, here's my week, or like, hey guys, we're meeting to talk about such and such. It's not that sense of creating necessarily the same content for your Substack audience as you create elsewhere. And I think that's quite interesting. Just, you know, think about what's your purpose? Why would you be writing there? What is your purpose for building community? And kind of know that, understand what you want to get out of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I suppose another thing as well, I ask you, is you know, how do you at the end of the day evaluate these things? How do you know, how do you sense what works? How do you measure what works? I mean, kind of like in terms of real data, do you do that? You know, what promotes change as well in your process? I mean, is it those kinds of things? Is it data? Is it a hunch? Is it, I didn't enjoy doing that, I'm going to do something else? I mean, what are the kind of dynamics of understanding those kinds of values, the values of being there and the values of doing these things for you?
I think for me, valuing the success of something. Well, coming from the marketing background, I'm always like, oh, analytics. Okay, like let's see how this works. I'm always interested to see how things change over time, you know? And I'm kind of interested in the psychology as well. Like, so for example, with Instagram, for example, and I make a post, I'm interested in the psychology of it to see like how do people respond versus like what the algorithm favors, because the algorithm is like this weird, like like intangible thing that is controlled by some secret hand. We don't really necessarily know like how the algorithm works or why, like Instagram will never reveal that, but we can kind of test it out and see. And so that is, yeah, that's just from like, I think looking at data, thinking about likes, you can now, if you have like, if you're a business account on Instagram, like you can see more further detailed analytics about things. And like, I guess you can think about that if you want to be more strategic with it. Sometimes strategy can help, and strategy also can prevent like using these apps from like being overwhelming in a way. But I think so partly I would say I measure my posts on, well, how many people read it versus how many people like clicked on it. Like, what's the percentage of that? Is that growing or is it not growing? Which is hard because then it becomes a space for anxiety, because then you're like, what if not enough people liked my post, and then what does that mean? If you have your marketing brain on, then you can just think of it like, okay, well, this is just particularly not a thing that resonates with people. Like, for example, if I post like, it's like an event flyer for something that's coming up and there's only text, it usually just gets like half the exposure, that like a photo of a thing or a person or like my face or something like that does. Or if I post something that has a really long caption in it and it's kind of like sharing something and it feels like genuine in a way, then sometimes that seems to get like an algorithm boost in Instagram, partly because people's eyes are staying on it longer as they read the caption. And then Instagram's algorithm is like, people think this is interesting. And they like push it out to other people. It's really like kind of nefarious the way that it rewards like attention in this way. But I think that's kind of like how, I measure it. But interestingly too, it's led to this thing now that's like authenticity itself has kind of become a brand, which now is like, feels, sometimes it's like, is this cringe? Is this not cringe? Is this too sincere? Am I actually being sincere? I'm not really, am I driven by likes or am I driven by sincerity and connecting with community? Self-inquiry is always good, I think, when you're utilizing these platforms. But I think that's part of it. And with with Substack posting, or like an event, like a book club event that I do, for me, the success there is really just like, do I feel satisfied with what I wrote and like how I look? Like not like visually, but how the piece looks like on the page. But it's but even then I'm like, am I always ever satisfied? I don't know. Sometimes I can read over something and say, okay, I think I'm proud, you know, of this. And for me, that's better than whether or not on Substack something gets like a lot of likes or something, you know.
How about you, Lindsay? What's your sort of process of evaluation and reflection on all of this?
Yeah, it's probably, I don't spend as much time in the dashboard as I could. And that's partly because I just go on my gut. I think I've gotten quite good at knowing when something is likely to resonate. So if I'm putting something out on a Sunday and I think, yeah, like I can kind of predict this is going to get people talking. And that's what I'm most interested in. This is going to get them talking to each other. It's not just about me, and it's not always about the words. But Elle mentioned that kind of sense of where you can go to find out what has and hasn't worked. You could go and start digging around and see what the open rate was on a post, or whether you've retained your subscribers. Have they stuck about, or are people like dropping off? I've cancelled all those notifications. I don't want to know. Come in, but also if you need to leave for any reason, that's all right. Like, it's fine. Unless of course you're going to reach out. I've had no trolling. There's been no trolling on Substack. Give it time, but it feels like I am there, and also on Instagram, to be my version of my kind of self, that feels, as you say, Elle, authentic. I feel like I'm becoming more myself, which is quite interesting, I think, in this time of AI. I'm becoming more me. Well, the world seems to be becoming more and more unknowable. And maybe that feels to me like my answer to the current climate that we live in. And that's fine. Stick about if you want to hang out with me. Like, you're so welcome. Because this is kind of what it is. It's teenage daughters, and it's cats, and it's bins, but it's also this comment on what's in the news, and it's also this caring responsibility, and this, I am sort of a multifaceted person, and my work, I think, reflects it, and that all feels like it can live together in my sort of social feeds in a way that makes sense to me. So that's my strategy. Just silence the haters and don't look at the bad stats. Focus on the good stuff, because life is short.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I'm very grateful to you both. But just wanted to pick up on one question was there. There's some great questions. There's some great answers. Thanks both in the chat feed there. Which is just someone, if you had to give one message to someone, a tip, what would it be? So people starting out on this, from your experience in the contemporary with these newish platforms and so on, what would be your tip? What's the takeaway at this moment?
Elle, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. So I think my top tip for getting started, right? Or you said top takeaway, top tip for getting started. I would say, like, I feel like the number one thing is choose like a platform that you like being on, that you want to be on. Like, for example, if you don't like TikTok, don't make yourself do it, because then you will never be consistent with it. And then also just like work to connect with people, but like do it in a genuine way, because people can tell when you're being transactional. Like, we're inundated with, maybe it's got to be like 20,000 adverts in a single day. So like, I think being genuine with people is I think that's like the one thing that I would say is, like, yeah, pick that platform that that you have fun on. Be consistent, and then just like be genuine when you connect. But connecting with people, I feel like, is crucial. Otherwise, you do end up kind of just being like a silo, kind of like shouting into the void, which isn't fun. And it isn't like interesting, so.
I've got two things I want to say. The first is that, you know, yeah, just don't, as you said, Elle, don't overpromise. If you're committed to a platform, you know, like Substack that does reward consistency and reward sort of playing the long game, then yeah, you're in the right place. I think something like, you know, a ridiculous stat like 87% of all Substacks become inactive after 3 months. So if you can just accept that you're on the roller coaster and that it might be going quite slowly for some time, but maybe eventually you'll get a bit of this, then you're onto something. And just don't forget that, you know, when you'll start to build a bit of momentum and have a bit of success, that there are people who are going to turn to you and ask you these questions, you know, and say, well, you know, and look for you. So I'm just so conscious that everybody I connect with, whether or not they have you know, achieved far more than I have, or they're coming up behind me, that we're all in it together, and that the only way is to lift as you climb, you know, that we're all sort of trying to, you know, do really quite difficult creative work in and around what are probably quite messy and complicated lives. So let's all just do what we can to support each other. And I think that's why you know, I'm on those platforms, because I feel supported and I feel that I can also offer that in the other direction. Reciprocity. There you go. Have it in a word.
Excellent, wonderful. Thanks. Well, look, I'd just like to say thanks to Lindsay and Elle, and perhaps I'd just add that one thing I would add is that don't be afraid to prototype. It's not failure. You can actually try things and see if they work, and if they don't, adapt and change them and keep dynamic. You know, don't think of anything that doesn't go the way you want it to go as a failure in this space. It is difficult. There is no one set thing, and it's, you know, without massive marketing budgets or all that kind of stuff, to some extent you are going to have to find out what works, and to to go with that, and to, as I say, don't call it a prototype. It's not a failure. It's not the finished thing. It will evolve and so on. And good luck if you're going to do any of that. And just a final word of thanks to Lindsay and to Elle, who have been great. So thanks so much, everyone. And I hope everyone enjoyed that. And we'll send you a link to this as well. So
Thank you, Peter. And thank you, everyone, for coming.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Elle. Thanks, everybody.
see you soon, guys. Cheers.